TikTok and how it affected elections. We got Dean. We got don't know who she is. We got I believe his name is it Parker or Brian? It's one of the two. I know he's like leans conservative, but he's opened his third eye and realized that Donald Trump is a piece of garbage. So we'll see it. Dean has been getting grilled lately, ever since his bullshit with the Unfuck America tour. So we'll see how this plays out.
About this phenomenon and why it's really important. I want to start with Brad because he's furthest away.
Brad,
really, like, why has politics become a thing on TikTok? Do you think? What is it about the medium that has made it popular as a form of political discussion in a way that probably people didn't expect when it first arrived?
Well, I think in media more broadly, we've seen a pretty significant shift away from big brands and big networks where people trust and go to get their information, and instead towards individuals, right? So people, I mean, some people still do, but people are less likely to follow a general network or read a newspaper than they are to follow Ben Shapiro or Joe Rogan or their many left-wing equivalents. People have really become attached to mini cults of personality for their media and news consumption, for better and for worse. We could go into the reasons why that in some ways breaks a harmful quasi-monopoly that a few media outlets historically had on accessing information and distributing it to the public. We could also talk about the many downsides of it, and I'm sure we will. I think TikTok is basically young people.
Oh, Brad. Hey, Brad, why are you saying some of that good shit? Oh, my God, Brad. Okay. Oh, I love when people actually make sense. Maybe when I get big enough, I'll talk to Brad on the podcast. We'll see. We'll see.
Version of that. They don't want to get the news from a faceless anchor who they don't know because they just flip on and that's who's in that block at that hour. They don't want to read because young people don't read. It's just true. It's sad.
I recommend signing up for a program called Informed. Their information's in my description. They send you like 3-sentence notes. Not even 3 sentences, like 2 sentences, arguably 1 sentence of news that's going on. Go sign up. It's in the description. I think it's an amazing product because, and they're not paying me, but because I agree, one of the biggest issues that we have right now is that people, like you said, don't want to read. They don't want to read a 8-minute page article. They don't want to do research. They want to get news quickly, and I think TikTok is the best way. But this way is the way the using Informed gives you a more objective, unbiased source that takes 10 seconds to read, if that. Honestly, 3 seconds. Sent to you every morning to your phone. I recommend easy information dissemination, unbiased.
I originally wanted to be a writer when I graduated college in 2019, and that lasted about a year before I realized that if I wanted to have any impact whatsoever, I would have to pivot to video and social media. So I think it's really that it allows you to build faith. I mean, this person's literally speaking to you in a very intimate setting, from their kitchen, from their bedroom, from their car, and you build trust and rapport with an individual person, and I think that's why it's become so big. But I also think that gets people engaged, but it can also be perilous because then fringe voices on either side, if people become attached to them as a personality, will follow them into dangerous, radical, or even conspiratorial territory. So, I mean, there's pluses and minuses to that.
Jamie, you've written a lot about Gen Z. I see you on TV. I'm talking about Gen Z. How important is TikTok to your network that you've built, and how much do people in that sort of demographic, how much do you feel like they're not just using it every day, but actually being influenced by it every day?
Yeah, and I think, I totally agree with everything Brad was just saying, that young people are going onto TikTok, they're going onto X, they're going onto Instagram to get a lot of their news. But I think for Gen Z, politics is not just about healthcare policy or taxes or immigration. There's a real cultural revival happening in this country, and it's happening on social media, both on the left and right. And so, for example, with young women who I talk to a lot in the conservative movement, they're watching trad wives, they're watching women, talking about making their sourdough, they're listening to women talking about going to church, going and being a wife and getting married and motherhood and all these other issues that really do feed into how people vote. And so I think we'd be remiss not to mention how important the cultural movement is that floods into politics.
And so some of these things are not necessarily overtly political, but they're part of a bigger...
They're coded right wing, and then there's also things on the left that are coded left wing, whether it be like tattoos or blue hair or liking coffee or talking about your cats or dogs or whatever. There's kind of, cliches on both sides, but definitely I think young women is about...
Talking about your cats and dogs is coded left wing? That's fucking cap. Republicans love their dogs. Which is a lie. That is a lie. Tattoos? Bro, they're a bunch of red day hillbillies that got plenty of tattoos. Blue hair for sure, coded lefty for sure. You should have said anime. That's coded lefty. What else would be coded lefty? Polygamy, definitely coded lefty. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Actually, we're listening to voices that we see on social media, and we're following them, and their lifestyles and culture really influence how we're voting in the voting booth.
Do you feel like there's something about the medium itself that works for you? Like how have you harnessed this particular medium to be so popular in terms of the number of people watching?
Yeah, I think getting on. I think for men a lot, they're kind of leaning in towards Reddit. They're leaning into podcasts. I think for women, we're also leaning into podcasts. I think TikTok is especially big for women. I think Instagram is huge. We all remember during multiple social movements and stuff, people posting their infographics online, and so that's how a lot of people are communicating with one another and sharing their thoughts. And I'm a big believer in free speech, and I think sunlight's the best disinfectant. And so I think it's been actually although there's a lot of debate and turmoil in our country, I think it's been overwhelmingly positive because it's having a chance to go to the public square and debate a lot of these issues out.
Positive. Is she MAGA? Is her third eye closed?
Dean, what do you think? What is it about the medium of TikTok, particularly, that makes you able to get your message across and makes people so engaged with it?
Sure, that's a good question. Well, first and foremost, I'd say a lot of the younger Americans consume most of their news off of TikTok because it's easier to access than maybe going to apnews.com and figuring out how to use their website to find news relative to any particular political issue or anything going on nationwide.
The dog shit excuse. You don't have to figure out how to use AP News. But there is an ease to TikTok. I mean, you just sign in and then you find a video. I hear you there. I guess because I use so many different news sources, they kind of direct me to different outlets like AP News, and I go straight to the article. So he might be correct. I might be flaming Dean a little bit too much.
Younger Americans are already on TikTok. They're using TikTok to consume short-form content related to their own interests. And what will happen is, in consuming this content related to their own interests, regardless if it's doom scrolling for 3 hours after an 8-hour shift or waking up to see what your favorite creator posted, is in that algorithm, you'll start getting recommended stuff about the news, about politics, because the way that politics works in our country today, and has always worked, is controversy brings a lot of attention. There's a lot of eyes on things that are controversial. There's a lot of eyes on things that can scare people. There's a lot of eyes on things that maybe people think could personally impact them in any way. And on TikTok, the algorithm really likes to push that content out to as many people as possible because individuals are more likely to watch it all the way through, engage with it, share it with their friend. So I would say that the algorithms on these social media websites are highly favorable for political and news-based content. And this is really factored into what I do because I'm on the other end of that. I'm the one putting out the content. And something that I always keep in my mind is, okay, I want to be able to deliver the same information that, reputable institutions reporting on news or in politics deliver, A, in a way that is easy to understand by the average younger American who doesn't know much about politics or maybe is just getting into things, and B, formatted in a way that the information is presented to them in a way that is easy to consume and easy to access. And I think those are my thoughts.
But Dean, so algorithmically, I think you're spot on it. But I think the problem is the incentives that creates. So I just spoke recently with my grandmother, who's about to turn 90, and she asked me what I thought about Barron Trump's wedding. And I said, oh, because Barron Trump has not, in fact, gotten married. She had seen an AI video on Facebook. And I think we're all familiar with kind of that end of disinformation and like fake news and things that spread. I think TikTok is Gen Z's equivalent of that. Because what controversy sells, if it bleeds, it leads. It's been translated to the digital era. So now, I mean, I particularly focus on kind of monitoring what political creators on TikTok are saying, and they tend to skew to the left, though there's also a right-wing ecosystem on there. They are constantly getting worked up about things that are happening. And then they're also getting worked up about things that are not in fact happening. There was an entire news cycle meltdown on TikTok where millions of people genuinely believed Trump was reinstating segregation in America because he repealed a Lyndon Johnson era executive order about affirmative action. If you understand how the law works, if you understand how executive orders work, if you just think about it for more than 5 seconds, he obviously wasn't reinstating segregation, but that's quite literally the belief that millions of people have. There was also another story just recently where the nuances of politics and policy that traditional reporters understand, or that people like us understand, are just lost on the public on TikTok and on the opportunists who want to go viral. So when a red state at the state level, a bunch of Republican lawmakers pass a meaningless resolution calling for the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges, the Supreme Court case that legalized gay marriage, the narrative on TikTok was the Supreme Court is about to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges. But those two things are actually unrelated. That's not a case that the Supreme Court can hear. And there's nothing in their docket that suggests they're revisiting that. They could, but that's not what's happened yet. So I just worry about the algorithmic side of TikTok and how it fuels kind of the digital Gen Z version of grandma is falling for AI slop.
Dean, do you find you have an incentive to be kind of as, like, maybe not controversial?
He is correct about that. That is a problem. And I'll be very clear, and I'll be very honest. I know there's a lot of conversation regarding mainstream media, and mainstream media. The biggest issue you could argue with mainstream media is that it is incentivized to sell to people and get as much attention as possible, but they're adherent to their advertisers to get paid, right? Um, so they are not necessarily putting out wrong information, but they'll have like clickbaity titles and they'll focus on the most controversial information. Social media, independent media outlets have no incentive to be truthful. Mainstream media does. They need to be truthful to have the level of integrity to keep on getting those people. Social media influencers have no incentive to be truthful. They just need clicks. They go right to the people. They just need attention. So they can go directly to the controversy without being established, without being adherent to an advertiser that will make sure that they are a reputable source. So, yeah, mainstream media doesn't have the people's best interests in mind often. Independent media could have people's interests best in mind. Like there are some good independent media where they are not beholden to an advertiser. Like I think his name is Dylan. But there is a lot of independent media people who are incentivized by money inherently and controversy. They don't give a fuck about whether or not they're being they have integrity, being honest. So in terms of being corrupt, independent media has a objectively more chance to be more corrupt than mainstream media, and that's not even an argument, to be honest. That's just true. So that's my thing. Like people go like, "Oh yeah, independent media." A lot of these motherfuckers be lying. They be corrupt. They be more captured than a mainstream source that has a lot of different people that are giving out the news. One individual can be manipulated like hell. I mean, perfect example: Charlie Cuck and Tim Bitch. Oh, that's not a good one. Charlie Cuck is the good one. I need a good one for Tim Pool. Tim Pussy. Yeah, those mother effers be beholden to the MAGA ideology and don't give a fuck about anything else. So independent media can be very dangerous as well.
But certainly you want to be eye-catching, right? Doing what you do, there must be an incentive. You want to get as many viewers as possible. That's the business we're all in. Do you find that gives you an incentive to be as controversial as possible the way you frame things?
That's a good question. I'd say that incentive exists for many people in the space. At the end of the day, that's how you get your numbers higher. But something I personally always, something I've always personally focused on is trying to be reliable, trying to be truthful, and try not just to fearmonger my audience because I know at the end of the day it'll give me higher numbers. Because at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that as many people as possible are informed on what the facts are. But I will say, to your point, Brad, is there is plenty of people on the platform that like to exploit that, take advantage of it. Because as long as you can push a narrative that is eye-catching and stirs controversy, it will catch eyes and it will stir controversy. But on the flip side, when we're looking at the more traditional media ecosphere, you're either watching somebody on your TV or you're reading a report online. And what is true of a platform like TikTok that's not true of traditional media is accountability in the viewership through things such as live commenting, reposting it, responding to it. See, when I turn Fox News on.
What accountability? What the fuck? That's bullshit. The people are not accountable based off their viewers at all. The only people who are accountable are people who are scared of cancel culture, like you did. For the most part, there is no accountability. You could still say whatever the fuck you want the next day and then still get viewers. There is way more accountability for mainstream media in terms of making sure they're factually correct compared to independent media. So I don't know about accountability. I just don't agree to that.
On my TV, I'll hear about how Dominion rigged the 2020 election, and until they lost in court, I had my mom, my dad, my sisters, my brothers all believing this because that's what the person on the TV was telling them, and there was nobody else to tell them anything else. So
now there is like news outlets, and then there is mainstream media personalities that be lying. Like Donald Trump is a pathological liar, right? So he could be saying whatever the fuck he wants. I don't count him as mainstream media. I don't count him as a news outlet. I just count him as a motherfucker that just be lying. And I also don't count politicians too, because politicians be lying as well. Mainstream media, for the most part, most of them are accountable. Some exceptions. Fox News, pieces of garbage. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
So there's definitely pros and cons to alternative media such as TikTok and more
I
traditional
just
media.
think there's a little bit more of, and maybe it's dying or going the way of the Joe Bird, of journalistic or professional ethics and introspection. So like Fox News fired Tucker Carlson, right? And after that lawsuit, a massive TikTok influencer who spreads fake news, or a right-wing YouTuber who spreads a fake story. Matt Walsh comes to mind. He did a whole show, a segment on his show, talking about how the Supreme Court blocked Trump's attempt to deport people from the country. Basically, we can't do it. It was actually a case that involved about 70 immigrants under the Alien Enemies Act, about 70 people. He claimed the Supreme Court shut the door on the whole Trump deportation agenda. So he didn't get fired, right? He didn't, his numbers didn't dip. Neither did many of these influencers.
He is 100% correct. He is cooking. He's cooking.
I think it was deeply flawed, but I think old school media had a little bit more of accountability and professional.
Let me bring in Jamie.
100%.
Critically minded, do you think Gen Z?
I'm already done watching this video. If you want to watch the full video, feel free, go ahead. I am in streaming. I am losing my edge, but there are some things that I still want to react to. So, is TikTok good for media? Is independent media better than mainstream media? There's a lot of nuance. I prefer a credible independent media source over a credible mainstream media source. But I think there's more margin of error for independent media. I think that's the important thing in this conversation.